My name is Stefan Dürr, and I have the great honor and pleasure today to welcome you to our little webinar around the COP26 in Glasgow. I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to have managed together with our partners, the Scottish Fuel Cell Association, David Scrimger, and also the Scottish government, to set up this little event right here. And unfortunately, there's one, bad news for the start. One of our panelists who would have represented MAN Energy Solutions, unfortunately, can't make it today. We hope to have him on one of our following up events that we are eager to plan and to conduct. But as for today, I'm really sorry to have to make this announcement. Still, we have 5 other topics to tackle, and I don't want to waste too much time. So I'm going ahead to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Alexandra Steen. She's director of the Scotland Hub in Germany based in Berlin. So she's trying and actually succeeding in bringing Scotland and Germany closer together. And for us, especially of special importance is that also renewable energies and hydrogen is a big topic for her. And what is even better for us here in Bavaria is that she's a friend of Bavaria. So we are very happy to work with her and to have her here today. And I will hand over to you, Alexandra. Please go ahead. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. As you say, I head up the Scottish Government office in Germany, and as you also say, we're a great friend of Bavarian. And I think it's worth saying that hydrogen and renewable energy are probably our #1 business priority here in Germany. It's Scotland's #1 business priority here in Germany. I think first of all, I'd like to say good morning, Damen und Herren, good morning. I'm likewise delighted to welcome you to this first online event between Scotland and Bavaria, and I do hope that it's the first of many to come. As Stefan said, hydrogen lies at the heart of Scotland's engagement with Bavaria, and it's also core to the cooperation that we have in the context of an MOU that we signed with Bavaria back in 2017. It's also worth noting that the Bavarian hydrogen strategy last May cited Scotland as being one of the potential hydrogen import countries for Bavaria, and also the Team Scotland, so that's myself and a couple of my colleagues from Scottish Bavarian International, for example, and also Nigel's on the call today, have also participated in the first 2 hydrogen dialogues that have been organised by H2 Bavaria. So there's a lot of activity going on already, and we hope it will certainly increase over the coming months and years. I need to say that as soon as COVID conditions allow, we hope to have many more face-to-face visits as well and discussions. So if we look to the agenda, I'm also delighted that we've got a good cross-section of speakers today. I'm just looking at my slides on, which I'm afraid aren't working. Here we are. Yep, sorry this. So my role is firstly to set the scene, in particular with respect to Scotland. I will hand over to Martin Grossmann, who is Head of Europe and Trade Affairs in the Bavarian Economy Ministry, and also back to Stefan, who's Head of Technology and Innovation at SHFCA, who will do the same as I've just done for Bavaria. Nigel Holmes, who is Chief Executive of the SHFCA, the Scottish Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association, will then provide further detail of some of the individual hydrogen projects across Scotland. And then Martin Henton, who is Technical Director of TÜV National Engineering Laboratory in East Kilbride in Scotland, will do the same from a Scottish perspective. It's probably worth noting that this online breakfast session also directly precedes a day-long TÜV event which is taking place in person in East Kilbride during this first week of COP26. We'll each speak for about 10 minutes before we close with a panel that's organised by Global Scot and my fellow hydrogen ally in Germany, David Scrimger. So if we look to start with Scotland first of all, I think in this week of all weeks, with the International Climate Conference taking place in Glasgow, the focus has to be on tackling our collective climate challenges. Scotland has had the ambition set in law since 2019 to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. And we've also got less than a decade to reach our 2030 target of a 75% reduction. And whether by 2045 or 2050, climate neutrality is a big ask of all of us. And to achieve it, we need to move at unprecedented speed to deliver the innovation, the technologies, the regulation and the market environment required. So Germany, Scotland and Bavaria are all, as we've already heard, deeply committed to hydrogen as part of that net zero transition. And in particular, I think its potential to achieve our green climate goals whilst at the same time securing economic recovery, maintaining our advanced industrial societies and also continued prosperity. And it's also worth noting that Germany and Scotland both have the ambition of producing 5 gigawatts of green and low carbon hydrogen by 2030. And where the German government wants Germany to lead globally in hydrogen technologies, and Bavaria is looking to use its engineering strengths to become a technology leader, the Scottish government has set a vision for Scotland to become a leading hydrogen nation, recognised internationally for the expertise and capacity. All three of us, that's Germany, Bavaria and Scotland, we all want to create sustainable business models for the future and new supply chain opportunities for business. It's all about achieving the climate goals and taking business with us. We want to develop hydrogen as a bridge between renewable energy production and then the applications across transport, heat and industry, and in particularly those hard to reach sectors. As we know, the German hydrogen strategy last year outlined Germany's need to import 90 to 110 terawatt hours of green hydrogen per year by 2030. The yet most ambitious scenario in the Scottish hydrogen assessment has calculated that Scotland has the potential to produce up to 126 terawatt hours of green hydrogen per year by 2045, and 94 of that ready for export. And that's creating an industry that's worth it could be worth up to 310,000 jobs and £25 billion for Scotland. So we have goals that are very aligned with each other. And so what is all of this based on? Well, our climate in Scotland gives us an abundance of the raw materials necessary to produce low-cost renewable energy. As I said, our wind has got to be good for something. We've got sound infrastructure, much of it coming from the oil and gas industry, and also a skilled workforce in energy technologies and offshore engineering. Again, much of it coming from the oil and gas industry, which means that we genuinely have world-class expertise to bear. Our greatest energy potential comes from wind. Our onshore wind capacity currently stands at 8.4 gigawatts. We have around a quarter of Europe's wind resources in Scottish waters, and also the largest seascape for future development in Europe. And this is why we think we really have something to bring to the table and to contribute. We're already a leader in offshore floating wind, with currently the largest installed capacity in the world, including the first commercial floating offshore wind farm, and that's from Equinor at 30 megawatts. It's called Hywind, and also the largest floating offshore wind farm, which is the recently completed 50 megawatt Kincardine offshore field. We forecast that our offshore wind sector will grow significantly over the coming years with rapidly decreasing costs. And we're currently running the first ScotWind leasing round for commercial scale offshore wind projects in Scottish waters. We're expecting decisions to be made on that in January, which will prepare the way for up to 7 gigawatts of floating wind. And also we know that there will be further leasing rounds to follow after that. So the ambition is to install up to 11 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030, which is enough to power up to 8 million homes. And given that we only have 2.2 million homes in Scotland, we are confident that we'll have plenty to share. So therefore, we do believe that Scotland has the potential to produce industrial scale quantities of green hydrogen that far exceed our indigenous demand, and that will also be sufficient to export to the rest of the UK and also to the rest of Europe. So my next slide, I've got some examples of demonstration projects, and Nigel will talk about these in more detail when he's speaking later. The key thing here is that we have a good track record with support for leading hydrogen demonstration projects over a good number of years, at least 10 to 15 years. We're also moving to scale from the individual demonstration projects to hubs, testing whole system approaches, moving forward by learning by doing, and seeking to optimize systems to bring down costs, and all of it through a collaborative approach, which is very much why we're here today. In my next slide, I've given you some links to documents, which I will not go through now, but those basically so that when you get the presentation afterwards, you can go and look up the key documents. And the main ones here to point out are the Hydrogen Policy Statement and the Hydrogen Assessment Report from the Scottish Government last December. They've got the facts and the figures and show where we're going now. And then the very bottom one now, the Hydrogen Action Plan. We're expecting to publish the Scottish Hydrogen Action Plan in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, and that should include an important international focus, which will also hopefully include Bavaria. So on this last slide, what I've done is I've summarised some of the key aspects of natural alignment between Scotland and Germany and Bavaria, based on a range of common and complementary interests. The last 3 to 4 bullet points in particular highlight common interests, I think, between Scotland and Bavaria across a number of innovation and engineering themes. We're confident there is some substantial potential for Scotland and Bavaria, firstly to collaborate to develop hydrogen technologies and the hydrogen market more quickly in light of our common production, storage and application interests. And secondly, where we have complementary interests, to match Scotland's vast natural resources and production capacity with Bavaria's engineering expertise to help develop supply chains. Thirdly, given Scotland's population size relative to production capacity and likely excess, we'd like to position Scotland as a key import for Germany and Bavaria, working with further partners such as Hamburg, for example, on the import-export technologies and the transport and storage transport through Germany and storage. We know that establishing the hydrogen value chain from source to the multiple markets and to end users will not be simple. And therefore, this is why we want to work together through structural collaboration. International engagement is in any case key for Scottish governments, a priority for ministers. As here, with international activity growing at pace in the field of hydrogen, we wish to collaborate actively to take forward research and strengthening the sector, and particularly in the area of higher education research, we're hoping to start some projects in the coming weeks. We're particularly interested in demonstrating Scotland's technology and innovation, and we want to share our expertise and learning from the many projects that have been ongoing in recent years. We want also to help integrate the different parts of the new energy system as they develop, and we would like to provide an international centre for testing and for integration. And also, of course, we want to work with international partners to explore areas for future collaboration and to develop the whole value chain in Scotland, in Europe, and across the globe. And the other thing that we're clear on is that this is a very quickly developing technology, very quickly developing area. So we want to remain fleet of foot and flexible and ready to adapt and to create new partnerships as new technologies and new opportunities arrive. We believe this is an area where Scotland has experience and potential to contribute, and hopefully today is just the start in exploring the many areas to come. So I will now hand over to Martin Grossmann from the Bavarian Economy Ministry in Munich, and also back to Stefan of the Bavarian Cluster Organisation in Nuremberg. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards and also to pick up conversation afterwards, which is why I've left my contact details here, along with those of SDI Germany. Scottish Development International is our agency for international investment and trade in Germany, and Meinhof Otto and Steve Taylor are my colleagues here. So thank you very much, and I will hand over now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And I will directly hand over to Mr. Grossmann.
All right, first the sound check and the picture check. Is everything all right? Yeah, all right, thank you. Well, thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much, Alexandra, for already quite a sound introduction into the matter. I'm very pleased to be here with you at today's webinar, and thank you very much first to Alexandra and the Scottish government and the office in Berlin headed by Alexandra, but also to both organizations, the Scottish Hydrogen and Fuel Association and the Bavarian Centre for Hydrogen, H2B as we call it, on taking this initiative to bring us all together to focus on hydrogen cooperation between Scotland and Bavaria. I'm happy also that a good number of companies and institutes and partners from both regions are joining today. Well, regardless of the ongoing pandemics, we in Bavaria and in Germany and also in Scotland and the United Kingdom, we are all still focused on the future of our climate, of energy, where, of course, hydrogen technology is a vital aspect. Scotland and Bavaria have shown the importance of this in recent years. We have quite a good, very intense cooperation already established in the field of renewable energy, but also different other fields. And the EU, Germany and Bavaria presented their relevant hydrogen strategies already some time ago. The shared message is, and I think this is also shared by Scotland, is that green hydrogen that is being produced without carbon dioxide belongs to the future, and therefore hydrogen is and will be a central pillar in the energy system of the future. We must, and this is of course already obvious now after the first 2 days of the Glasgow summit, we must act fast and courageous, both in Scotland and Germany and elsewhere, to secure the great opportunities that green hydrogen presents for our environment, for our industry, for our heating systems, and also for our employment in our economy. Bavaria wants indeed to make use of these chances in the future and for the future. The benefits are clear. Only with hydrogen and its versatile use will we succeed in the long-term shift to renewable energy and to decarbonization in industry and mobility and heating. Hydrogen also makes the global logistics and also the import of renewable energy easier. With our Bavarian hydrogen strategy, we have taken the complete value chain into account, from production via storage and transportation through utilization and the use of the hydrogen. In order to reach our goal of making Bavaria a leading location for hydrogen technologies, we follow basically 3 main targets. First, we want to have a leading position in innovation and technology. Second, we want to accelerate industry upscaling and cost efficiency. And third, we want to push forward hydrogen applications in transportation and industry and the development of an appropriate hydrogen infrastructure. Bavaria's strategy aims at becoming a leading location for hydrogen applications, for hydrogen technologies, where indeed all sides will benefit from. This is absolutely the same idea as we could see in Alexander's slide. The famous win-win outcomes should be our common aim. And our idea is to bring our companies and research institutes and universities together, both at national and international level in order to match the complementary interests in Scotland and Bavaria. Also to keep the collaboration strong over time and to build up an expanding bilateral network that ensures that we can have successful partnerships at national and international level. Such a cooperation is needed when we are facing common challenges, such as reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions and combating the climate change. Just as an example, and you could see it very well from the slides of Alexander, countries with a substantial wind potential, such as Scotland, could of course concentrate more on the production and countries and regions like Bavaria should maybe more focus on the development and export of new technologies, for instance, electrolyzers and fuel cells. Bavaria is already in the middle of the implementation of our hydrogen strategy. First, we have started an offensive research strategy on hydrogen. We are already supporting a variety of innovative research projects, for example, for larger electrolyzers or for fuel cells for commercial vehicles. And of course, the next step will lead from the laboratories to the streets. So in order to materialize the research results and make it visible and applicable in industry and other important sectors like transport, logistics, and so on. Here we want to accelerate with new operating centers. Second, since October 2020, we are also supporting the setup of the infrastructure with our new Bavarian funding guidelines for hydrogen filling stations for commercial vehicles. As a basis infrastructure, Bavaria shall build around 100 hydrogen filling stations until 2023. And third, already in September 2019, we established the Centre Hydrogen.Bavaria, SHFCA, as well as a Bavarian Hydrogen Alliance. And as a result, Bavaria has up to now quite an effective network with more than 100 partners, from innovative small and medium companies to global players. And the Hydrogen Centre Bavaria, of course, is the nucleus, the important platform for international cooperation, also with Scotland, of course. And fourth, we are also setting the course for the hydrogen future in the foreign trade promotion when it comes to the future of hydrogen. We want to use the Bavarian competence and our good reputation to include and enter into new markets. As a conclusion, hydrogen also in our view is key in climate protection, in decarbonization, in innovation and creation of value. The time and of course also the outcome of the ongoing summit in Glasgow in these days is crucial. At the moment, all opportunities are open and we have to seize them now, as all our politicians would always underline. Scotland, as a hydrogen pioneer, is for Bavaria a very valuable and strong partner. So let us join forces and seize the opportunities presented. Events like today's webinar are, of course, extremely important in order to achieve this. I wish you inspiring discussions and all of us a successful implementation of hydrogen technologies in Scotland and Bavaria and elsewhere, of course, in the world. Thank you, and I will now pass the floor back to Stefan, who did not present himself, so I will quickly step in and say a few words. He is indeed one of the founding colleagues of the Hydrogen Center in Bavaria, and he is the head of the Department for Innovation and Technology, and he will now further explain some concrete examples of successful Bavarian hydrogen projects so far. Okay, Stefan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your
Yeah,
attention.
thank you very much, Mr. Grossmann, and thank you for the introduction. I will just dive right into my short presentation. I will keep it short. And luckily, you already mentioned quite a few things that I wanted to mention as well. Of course, energy is a big topic in an industrialized state such as Germany and Bavaria. So just to give you one quick fact, and that's basically all you have to get from this slide, is at the moment we are still importing more than 70% of our energy. And I don't think this will change. Maybe it will change where we use the energy and in which form, but I don't think it will change too much. Of course, we are trying to build up renewable energies, but our potential is just not as high. Okay, but to dive right into some examples that I just wanted to show you that, well, hydrogen is not just the future, it's already happening now, is one pretty famous one, at least in Germany and also in Bavaria, which is a combined system of the Stadtwerke Haßfurt, so a regional energy supplier who is using surplus energy from own PV and wind farms to well generate hydrogen, store it, and inject it into the local grid. And with this system, you can actually do power balancing. So if there is surplus, you can store it, and if you need more energy or heat, it's a combined heat and power system. You can use the stored hydrogen to help balancing the grid. So that's an example for an efficient integration also in existing infrastructure, because it's really just set into the existing gas grid, wastewater treatment and energy grid. So that's something we are pretty happy with. And of course, in Haßfurt, the partners are really proud, and I think it's their proper right to be. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. Another one, and that's a little more like looking into the future. There is now the first project going on with which will build hydrogen pipelines. Well, it's actually using an existing pipeline, setting it up for hydrogen outside of one chemical plant, because as you might know, like hydrogen pipelines at the moment run in one production unit, for example, but not like connecting different production sites, going translocal or transregional. Bavaria or our partners in the Hydrogen Alliance are now starting to do so, and this is especially important because on this side here in Gendorf, there's a chloralkali process which has surplus hydrogen. And on the other hand, a few kilometers away, roughly 10 kilometers away, there's a refinery and a chemical plant which will use the hydrogen. At the moment, the hydrogen of the chloralkali is not really used. A little bit is used for internal heat, but the rest is well not used in a meaningful or proper way, and that's gonna change. This system will be open also to refueling stations, and as I said, the refinery and chemical plants. So here it's a first in Bavaria, really building a new a local or regional hydrogen network, which will then, as that's what we hope, connect to a European hydrogen backbone in the end and lead to a proper and wholesome hydrogen network in Bavaria. A third one that I really wanted to share, because it's an example of how fast companies, especially small companies, can act. So the next accelerator is a consortium of two small companies, like two SMEs, the Paul Group and Meyer Cordulec, in combination with Shell Germany. And they had the plan, like Meyer Cordulec is a logistics company, and Paul Group is a manufacturer like of custom-built trucks, buses, and so on. And they had the plan to well build up a small demo fleet of fuel cell electric trucks, but there was no product. So they were like asking themselves how to accelerate this process, and finally they just went ahead not really waiting for any funding, because they just wanted to be quick, and they actually were, because I remember the first discussions with this consortium was a little more than 1 year ago. And after all this, last month, they actually presented their product, and it's not just a picture. I actually saw it, like it drives. You have to say that in times of of companies selling products as driving, which weren't really driving, of course, but this one actually is. And I think it's just great to see it, that like those small companies can act that fast, because the technology is available. So it's not a question of hydrogen is the future. The technology is right there. If you use it, if you really want to, you can do. And the result is a truck that is available starting next year in small numbers, and in a bigger series in 2 years of time. With that, I have some more projects which I don't want to go through looking at the time, but of course you will receive the slide deck afterwards. Just to sum up, I showed mobility, I showed logistics, but that's not everything. There are also projects doing synfuels, doing fuels from biomass, for example, combined also biomass and hydrogen from electrolyzers, for example. So really a quite big variety also in terms of research. So the Bavarian universities are heavily involved. You will see that here, FAU, for example, TU Munich are involved in more than just one of those projects. So there is also a lot of research going on. And also just to put it out there, but not to go through in detail, there are 6 IPCEI projects on the shortlist in Germany, which will be based in Bavaria, and topics go from SOFC production to actually building cars. So I think Bavaria is set up and ready to go. And I hope we can do this together with Scotland, of course. And with that, I will hand over to Nigel now. Nigel Holmes from the Scottish Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. So Nigel, go ahead, floor is yours.
Stefan, many thanks for that introduction, and I'm delighted to be with you this morning. So in the interest of moving forward, I will share my screen, and let's just go into the full screen mode. Is that okay? So can you hear me, see me? Excellent.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. So I'd just like to take you through some of the activities that are happening in Scotland, and also how we've actually arrived at this point. And starting off, the key thing is we're seeing activities not just in one location in Scotland, but many areas of Scotland, in cities and in more remote areas. And the common theme here is starting to do the actions that will help us to deliver net zero. So displacing fossil fuels, starting to use more renewables, and hydrogen being a key part of that change. And this goes right back to a couple of years ago, when the UK set a target for net zero by 2050. And at the same time, Scotland set a target for 2045, but with an interim target for 2030 of a 75% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for Scotland. Now, that is a real stretch target, but there's been great progress already with decarbonisation of the electricity supply in Scotland. As Alexandra mentioned, we have a lot of renewable generation now in Scotland. Most of it's on wind, but the onshore wind, but increasingly the offshore wind is becoming really important. And going forward, so last year we almost produced 100% of our annual electricity demand in Scotland from renewables, and we see this continuing to increase. We won't stop at 100%, we will keep going. And the extra renewables production, as Alexander mentioned, will be about producing energy that can be either used in Scotland for decarbonising the non-electrical part of energy, so that's the heat, transport and industry, or can actually be used for export into adjacent markets. So a massive potential here. And as I say, driven to a large extent by the growth of offshore wind. So this map shows some of the locations in Scotland where there are already either operational or in construction or consented offshore wind. And you'll see later that there's actually a lot more to come. But just to start off with a quick trip around Scotland, we're going to start just north of Edinburgh in Levenmouth, head up to Aberdeen, then to Orkney, the islands off the very top of Scotland, and then back down to Cromarty. So Levenmouth, just north of Edinburgh, used to be a massive export for coal. The dock that you see in the picture here used to export coal. The building here is the hydrogen office, which was opened about 10 years ago. And in the first 10 years, it provided a fantastic amount of awareness raising, workshops with the local schools and colleges, and about 30,000 pupils and students have actually been through the workshops. And the important thing here is that it's raised the awareness and the understanding of hydrogen in the local community. Why is that important? Well, because the next stage in Levenmouth is going to be actually converting some of the houses from using natural gas for heating to using green hydrogen for heating. So in this picture on the left, you have the hydrogen office is right up at the top left corner of the picture with the small wind turbine, 750 kilowatts. This is a 7 megawatt offshore wind, well, just about offshore wind turbine. The electrolyzer will be installed in the energy park, and that will produce green hydrogen, which will then be distributed via the gas networks. In fact, a new gas network, a hydrogen network, will be laid in the streets alongside the existing gas pipes. And the householders in about 300 houses will have the option of actually opting in to use hydrogen instead of natural gas. So this is a test of the technology, but also a test of the consumer acceptance of hydrogen. So that's going to be happening over the next couple of years. And hopefully in 2 or 3 years' time, what you see here, the picture of the houses on the hill and the turbines, the houses will be heated using the energy from the turbines. And this will be a key part of going forward. If this works, then there'll be a lot of other projects around the UK which will develop the same approach using green hydrogen for heat. Moving up to Aberdeen, Aberdeen, very much the oil and gas capital of Europe, but recognized many years ago it needs to change. It needs to become more about renewables, and hydrogen has been a key part of the journey in Aberdeen. They have a very diverse fleet of hydrogen vehicles. They've got about 60 vehicles at the moment. They've got hydrogen buses. The single deckers that you see in this picture, this was taken a couple of years ago, have now been replaced by double deckers. And this builds on the experience they've had with the hydrogen refueling. So producing the hydrogen locally from electricity, using that to refuel the buses and cars and vans and trucks. So a key level of experience from Aberdeen. And going forward, not just producing it from the local electricity grid, but also producing it from offshore wind is one of the next steps. And the offshore wind, the wind farm will be just off Aberdeen with some 10 kilowatt floating wind turbines producing hydrogen that goes straight back to Aberdeen down a pipeline. So the electrolysis is offshore, the use of the hydrogen is onshore. And we believe this is one of the ways that the deployment of offshore wind can be extended further into the North Sea and still be able to bring the energy back to the shore at a low cost. So making it more commercial, especially at scale, will be a key way forward. And going up to Orkney now, off the north coast of Scotland, at the very top of Scotland, Orkney for the past 6 or 7 years has generated more renewable energy on an annual basis than it actually, more renewable electricity on an annual basis than it needs. And the challenge has actually been in many areas of Orkney, actually being able to incorporate that renewable electricity effectively into the local demand for energy, not just electricity, but transport and heat. And there's been a series of projects. This schematic is from the Big Hit project, which was the SHFCA funded project. A number of projects which have put electrolyzers next to wind turbines, so you can actually capture the energy locally, produce the hydrogen and use the hydrogen. And Chappensea, for example, the school has a hydrogen boiler. Kirkwood, there's hydrogen refueling for the vehicles, and also has a hydrogen fuel cell, actually a proton motor hydrogen fuel cell at the harbour. And in the picture here, you can see some of the equipment. So the blue box on the quayside, that's the proton motor fuel cell, hydrogen in the trailers, the vans that use hydrogen fuel cell range extenders, and of course the ferry that brought the hydrogen across from Shappensea to Kirkwall. But going forward, there's a lot more to come in Orkney. There's projects on decarbonising shipping. Ferries are a big user of energy. Flight, so the High Flyer project has been supported by the European Marine Energy Centre, who've been central to a lot of this work, and distilleries. And I don't think we'll have time to talk about this much, Stefan. There's got to be another webinar on decarbonising distilleries and the lessons from what's going on in Scotland. And the final example, just coming down the coast from Cromarty, so just near Inverness, it's a big harbour, big natural harbour that up to now has been very much supporting the oil and gas sector, but increasingly it's supporting offshore wind. So you can see in the harbour, one of the floating offshore wind turbines. And the plan for Cromarty is to start to scale up production. Scottish Power are going to install a 35 megawatt electrolyser for green hydrogen. There is potential demand from distilleries around the Cromarty area, but also potentially starting to use some of the existing pipelines to move the hydrogen. So very similar to the projects that Stefan mentioned in Bavaria, the use of pipelines to move the hydrogen around going forward. And starting to use the port also for transshipment of hydrogen. So links into Norway will help us to actually provide a more secure supply of green hydrogen, both into the local area, but for onward shipment into Europe. So going forward, obviously COP26 this week in Glasgow. Glasgow's also got work happening with hydrogen. And the key thing here is all of these projects, it's about scaling up. It's about then starting to see how we use that energy effectively to decarbonise the local energy system, but potentially going forward, export of energy into adjacent markets such as Europe. So scaling up, just a final slide, scaling up hydrogen for, with offshore wind. Here you can see some of the projects happening around Scotland, and two locations where this is actually starting to take shape. One is the Shetland Islands, north of Orkney, and in Orkney itself, there are proposals for a big hydrogen hub in Orkney, potentially up to gigawatt scale. So starting with the lessons learned, scaling up and looking to export going forward. So a quick schematic of the Flosser Hydrogen Hub. As I say, 2 gigawatts of offshore wind. Not all of that will be used for hydrogen production, and this is intended to be in operation by the late 2020s. Shetland, again, this one is about repurposing of oil and gas assets. So energy transition, scaling up green hydrogen. So thank you very much for listening. That is very much the message is, how do we work together? What can we do going forward that benefits both Scotland and Bavaria? And of course, taking advantage of what's happening in Glasgow this week, COP26. So Stefan, thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Microphone needs to be close to the mouth. Nigel, we have one question. Maybe we just answer it right here because I think it's a quick one. There was a question, how is the hydrogen transported via ship? Is it like gaseous, liquid, or LOHC? So maybe you can just add this quick answer right here.
So the initial stage, I think it's gaseous hydrogen that's being moved in the initial stages. At small quantity, that doesn't work. As you go to medium quantity, you need to start to look at other options, and ultimately pipelines will be the way forward. So there's already plans in place for Flotter to be connected down to St Fergus near Aberdeen by pipeline, and to use that. And then the question is, how can we find the pipelines to get from Scotland across to Germany? So large-scale pipelines are the key way forward here, Stefan.
Okay, thank you very much also for your answer and the presentation. Now we come to the final presentation to Mr. Martin Hendren from TÜV Süd, and Paula Maria Auersaupe will also give a short introduction to the German side, I think. Martin, I know you have a busy schedule, but you still have time. We might shorten the panel discussion a little bit, so don't feel too stressed, and the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Has that come through okay to everybody? Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. Myself and my colleague Paula will just tell you a little bit today about TÜV Süd and what we are doing in the area of hydrogen. So TÜV Süd is a large company, as you can see from this slide. It's headquartered in Munich, but as you can see, we operate globally. And what we do as a business is we offer TIC services. So that is testing, inspection, and certification. And we offer those services across the business life cycle, from planning and design through to construction and implementation, and onwards into decommissioning. And as you can see there, we offer them pretty much across every industry sector that you can conceive of. And one of the things that is very important to us, it's integral to our DNA as an organisation, is around trust and third-party independence. So people come to TÜV Süd for their testing, inspection, certification services because of that third-party independence and the ability to offer confidence in what they do. So moving swiftly on to focus on hydrogen. As an organisation, over the last few years, we have established a large international network of hydrogen experts, as you can see from this slide. There's 1 or 2, 3 countries where we have a real critical mass of expertise, but we actually have hydrogen experts on the ground in quite a number of locations now, and that continues to expand all the time. And so one of the key things here about partnering with TÜV Süd is that we can offer people on the ground in many, many countries with real expertise in hydrogen, and we have a global network of experts that can help you with your TIC services. Just to focus a little bit on Scotland in particular, the division that I sit within is TÜV Süd National Engineering Laboratory. We sit in East Kilbride, just south of Glasgow, and we're obviously part of the TÜV Süd company, but really important for us is the fact that we're also part of the UK's national measurement system funded by BASE, and we are the UK's designated institute for flow and liquid density. And so what that means is that we hold the physical reference standards for the UK for those purposes, and we do a lot of testing and inspection against those standards to verify people's flow measurement. Historically, as an organisation doing flow measurement, we supported very strongly the oil and gas sector, also the water sector to some extent, and emissions monitoring. But in the last 3-4 years, we've done a huge amount to realign ourselves to the UK industrial strategy. And what we've been doing here is taking the skills and experience that we had largely from the oil and gas sector and translating these to new areas such as life sciences and healthcare, digital metrology, but most importantly for today, things like hydrogen and CCUS. Okay, sorry, slight delay there. So the question people may ask is, why is flow measurement so important for things like net zero? The simple answer is because flow meters are the cash registers of any energy system. So if you think about oil and gas, every fiscal and financial transaction is based upon a flow measurement. So from the domestic gas meter on your house to whether you're filling your car with petrol and diesel, or whether we're thinking about large gas meters on the gas network or fiscal meters coming out in the North Sea in an oil rig. And so it's really important to enable the actual economy that you've got accurate flow meters as accurate cash registers. If we think about net zero and a future energy system where apart from electrification, you've got a lot of hydrogen and carbon dioxide, these are also liquid and gases. And so flow meters will also be the cash registers for the non-electrified part of the future energy system as well. And this is why we've been doing so much work in the last 2 or 3 years to make sure that what is in place needs to be in place in terms of national measurement traceability, capability, etc. So we have lots of lovely facilities at our site in East Kilbride related to the water and the oil and gas sector. I'm not going to show you those today. What I'm going to show you is our first facility related to hydrogen, which is this one here. which allows us to test and calibrate domestic and small commercial gas meters for hydrogen service. It's a very flexible facility, so we can test with pure hydrogen or blends with natural gas. And we've actually been using this facility for the last 8 months or so to support the high deploy hydrogen demonstration project. The next facility will be bringing online very shortly. It's under construction at the moment. It's almost complete. We should take delivery in the next month or two. Is a mobile facility to test hydrogen refueling stations in terms of dispensed quantity at the nozzle. Obviously, in the same way for petrol and diesel, people would like to have confidence that they get what they pay for when they fill up their vehicle. The same obviously exists for hydrogen vehicles in the future. And so we're working to make sure that people have that confidence and that the regulatory compliance is present. So having focused down quite narrow in terms of what we do in this specific division here in Scotland, I'm just going to broaden it right back out again and say, as part of TÜV SÜD UK, we are increasingly expanding our range of hydrogen related TIC services. And as a whole organisation, TÜV SÜD offers TIC services that pretty much cover every part of that hydrogen value chain. And I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Paula at this point, who will tell you a bit more about our climate action certification in particular. So over to you, please, Paula.
Thank you, Martin. So I just share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see
Okay.
it, but it's not yet in presentation mode.
Okay, so let's do it like that. So actually,
Perfect.
thank you. What do we do in regard to climate action and certification? We certify the color of hydrogen. And why is that important? In a purely renewable world, we could say the certification of hydrogen is not important, but in short term, when we will have still gas and coal within our energy mix, it will be important. That means at least until 2050. Why is that so? Because produced hydrogen should contribute significantly to climate protection, so it must emit remarkably less greenhouse gases than conventionally produced hydrogen. And it needs to consider the whole value chain. Certification gives a clear criteria for industry and investors as to which hydrogen technology is suitable and sustainable for the future. And last but not least, double counting or multiple sales of CO2 reduced hydrogen must be prevented. So at the moment, there are 3 standards existing that are quite recognized. This is ISCC, Certify, and TÜV SÜD CMS 70. They differ in regard to the renewable input as well as to the GHG reduction that is required, and at the end the process how the guarantee of origins are registered. When we have a look here, all of the 3 require 100% renewable input. TÜV SÜD has additional criteria on the additionality of the electricity supply. They also differ quite well in regard to GHG reductions. ISCC has no requirement in that regard. Certify is about 60%, and TÜV SÜD requires 75%, depending on the process, how hydrogen is produced, and which is really important, emissions related to compression, liquefaction, and transportation are included as well. So we as TÜV SÜD have a team of experts that can certify according to all of these 3 standards. We have experience in the markets since more than 10 years. So we really live the green future. So, and with that, I'm handing back to you, Martin or Stefan.
Thank you very much for this insight in a very, very important topic. At least that's what I think, because like working and transparent certification will help us getting back to actual like useful discussions sometimes and not having to answer the same questions, green, blue, what should we do? So I think you're doing a pretty important and good job right there. And we are hoping that this certification process will just pick up even more speed to conclude, because especially in all these discussions, as I said, blue, green, or whatever color, this would help a lot to get back to actually discussing the technical solutions and investment and so on. But thank you so much for your input. Maybe one last thing I wanted to add, because unfortunately we are running a little out of time for a panel discussion, but maybe to include David here is a final question for you. Maybe David, could you give us your point on how should Scotland and Bavaria build up on the existing MOU for renewable energy, and how could we further develop a Scottish Bavarian approach for renewable hydrogen and renewable energy trade, basically? So maybe just so that you don't leave here unseen and unheard, I'm just passing the floor to you right now for a close.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stefan, and thanks to the speakers as well. It's very clear that there's a huge opportunity, but at the same time, it's a bit like dealing with climate change. How do you actually get onto the ground and deal with the problem in a practical and meaningful way, rather than just, as you say, Stefan, talking about whether it should be blue or green, which is kind of not relevant. I've got a couple of ideas or suggestions very quickly before we finish. We talked when we were organizing this event about having a matchmaking event, which is normally what H2B does. They've done some very good events together with Chile, with Norway, with other countries in the world, bringing companies from each country together. So we plan to do that between Scottish Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association and H2B next year. So I suggest to those of you who are listening that you watch out for that, and we'll certainly be communicating it in good time. And in that, in order for that to be then develop into a meaningful development, so that it leads to ultimately to joint projects, which is what we're all here for. My suggestion, Nigel, Stefan, would be for both the associations to set up working groups of companies within your associations that are interested in developing business in Bavaria, in Scotland. We've already heard today from one company that's a member of both associations, that's TÜV Süd. We should have heard from MAN Energy Solutions, is also a member of the H2B, not yet Scottish Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. That's one for you, Nigel, but they are very active in Scotland, not least working with Glenmorangie on a very interesting hydrogen conversion project. So those would be my two suggestions. Let's organize a matchmaking event so that companies can actually speak to each other about real possibilities, and that we have working groups established in both of the associations to really focus on what the opportunities are and get moving on this agreement, which is to date really only on paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And I really share your view, especially also on your remark on the MOU, which is just existent on paper. We are working on that and hoping to well be more a project attached maybe in the future. And so thank you very much for yeah, your view, and to all the other panelists also, of course, for your contributions to today's event. And as was said multiple times today, this is just, well, the kickoff basically. We were discussing in preparation for this event that this should be just the first one. As David mentioned, and Nigel, I think earlier too, we are planning to do further events. So, well, stay tuned, and we are getting back to you. And also, please inform your neighbors and partners maybe around you that we are going to work together, and we are hoping that there is a lot of interest also from research side, from industry side, and so that we can work closely together. Because as I know, both SHFCA and also H2B, or the Hydrogen Alliance, are not pure industry. So there's also a lot of research partners in there. And I think that's a good platform or a good pool of knowledge that we can use and we should use in future. But that being said, I like to thank all the panelists as well as all the viewers for today. And well, we are hoping to stay in touch also with you. If there are any further wishes or well, information needed, please feel free to contact us, either Nigel or me or our office in Nuremberg, and we are getting back to you as well. So for today, I wish a pleasant day, also a pleasant following up event for you, Martin Henton in the UK. And well, as I said, stay safe, stay focused, and we're keeping our relationship alive, I would say. Okay, take care and goodbye.